One of the questions that I get the most in the past few months basically is, hey Marnix, should I make an incremental game myself? Because we have had some pretty good experience, I would say so far, with making an incremental game. MO98, our incremental game, is sitting at nearly 21,000 wishes at this point and is releasing in 3 or 4 days from now. And it's not even just us, it's also other game dev content creators, like for example a game about feeding a black hole. The moment you can put $100,000+ in your YouTube thumbnail, people are going to click it. And people will also then see that and be like, hey, money does sound pretty nice. Should I maybe drop my project and get started with making an incremental game? And I kind of want to answer that question, or at least give you some of my thoughts regarding this. Of basically, should you make an incremental game? Whether that is starting your next game as an incremental game or dropping whatever you're working on right now and making an incremental game. But I think we first need to talk a little bit about what the hell is an incremental game? Because I think that is the first big problem that I have. I'm gonna put 4 games on screen right now. And all 4 of these games are incremental games. Like for example, MO98 and a game about feeding a black hole are both classified as incremental games. Steam also doesn't really have a true incremental tag. It's kind of just idler or clicker and things like that. It's a bit of a mess, to be honest. And I think that is the first problem of like, okay, you want to make an incremental game. What style of incremental game are you going to be making? Because there are a bunch of different like kinds basically. And I'm also assuming that you're talking about what's kind of called short scoped incremental games. The games that take only a few hours to complete, whereas, you know, incremental games for some people, it's also that idea of, oh, it's a cookie clicker, or it's a Malware Idol, a Realm Grinder, games that take thousands of hours to complete. And that is something that just takes a lot more time and skill to develop, and you can't really make as a small scoped game. Whereas there are also incremental games that are between 2, 3, 4, 5 hours maybe, and that are still raking in big wads of cash, which is the ones that you're probably interested in as well. So incremental game, it's kind of a very broad term, but I quickly want to tell you what my definition or like understanding of incremental game is, like my vision is, it's 2 things. The main goal is to make a number go up. You can say to a certain degree that like all games just are number go up games, but I think especially incremental games, there is somewhere on your UI a big number that you can see that always has to go up. Whether that's money earned, whether that is the amount of players like in MO98 or something else, there is a very clear thing of like, as long as this goes up, I'm doing good. And then the second thing is that there is generally not a real fail condition. If you play the game completely wrong, you will not lose. You will simply progress slower than if you played the game correctly, basically. Those are kind of my 2 requirements, in my opinion, for an incremental game. So, okay, that still gives us a lot. So, for example, then you can look into like, okay, I have Nodebuster likes, which is the one where it's like those 15, 20-second loops. You have something that you do manual interaction with, and then you go, you get your big ass skill tree, and then you go and you repeat it again basically, and you just keep getting more powerful. That's also games about feeding a black hole, for example, is Nodebuster likes. There's so many other ones. When I get viewer games submitted that are like incremental games, I would say like 80% of them are Nodebuster likes, where you have the little circle hovering over something, you have that time limit, and then you repeat the process basically. This is the most common genre. Is that good? Is that bad? I don't know. I'm not here to say like, oh, you shouldn't make Nodebuster likes. I mean, personally, I may not be the biggest fan, but I do not know if that's like the best genre to make or if there's other genres to make. I think that's also not really the point, but that does lead into the next question that I get often of like, okay, hey Marnik, should I make an incremental game? Or is the market too saturated, do you think? And here, especially with the Nodebuster likes, it is a little bit more obvious because there are just so many of these games releasing. And I think we need to take a step back and take a look at like, what does saturated actually mean? Because this is not the first game or like the first genre in my experience as a game developer over the past 4 years that has gotten saturated. I'm looking back to, for example, the Vampire Survivors wave from about 2 years ago at this point. And you can draw a lot of parallels from the hype of Vampire Survivors, like action roguelites or whatever you want to call it, to also incremental games now on the other hand. And what you saw with the Vampire Survivor likes is, I think, saturated is another way to say that the barrier of entry for a generic game just keeps getting tall, like higher and higher. Where when Vampire Survivors first came out, if you could make a cheap knockoff version in like 3 months, 6 months, however long, where you add like one unique mechanic, like there's crafting or there's I don't know what else, basically. There is something else around it based upon that core Vampire Survivors gameplay loop. And if you were just fast enough to market when you are at that rising of the wave, basically, you were golden. But as more and more games come out, and you're releasing a game 1 year, 1.5 years after Vampire Survivors comes out, demand will get lower. More people will have been making these games at this point, and that means that the level of quality needed to stand out is going to be higher as well. The level of quality for your game, if you want to compete in the big boy leagues, is basically what I want to say. Of like, I mention this often of like, you know, a game should be at least a 5 or a 6 out of 10 to be on Steam. Period. Like an objective 5 or 6 out of 10. I'm not talking review score either, just like, you know, I don't know how to quantify it. The bar of quality. And then now the longer you wait, like a Vampire Survivors likes at this point needs to be like a 9 out of 10, 9.5 out of 10. That's how you get the mega bonks. They innovated on the genre, they're extremely polished, extremely deep, and all of those things. But you may not be able to hit that level. And that's what is kind of the bigger problem. It's not saturated, it's just that your game isn't good enough to compete with all of the other games that are coming out at this point. So kind of just wanted to talk about that because I think an important thing to note as well is that incremental games are not a new genre. I've been playing Egg Inc. on my phone for the last, I think, more than 10 years almost. I was playing it in middle school, I feel. And incremental games and like Flash games have been existing way longer than that. Of course, this like short-scoped incremental game is a little bit more of a new concept, but there is a case to be made that incremental games have been saturated for tens of years at this point. So I wouldn't really worry about that too much. I think you should worry more about, can I actually bring something new and unique to the table at a high enough quality level? I think like also taking a look at, for example, the Vampire Survivors, like what I think it just came out or it's going to come out in a few days from now also is Vampire Survivors or like Vampire Crawlers Turbo Wildcard from Vampire Survivors. They have kind of a weird name. Vampire Crawlers, that's that same question of, okay, this may be a genre-defining game, and you bet your ass that there are already other developers who saw the performance of Vampire Crawlers in the Steam Next Fest 1.5 months ago at this point, and immediately jumped on that to release a similar Crawlers-like a month from now or whatever. And they will always have the leg up, assuming that their bet pays off and the Crawlers likes are going to get more of a demand. And they may not need as high of a quality bar to reach, basically, to get a moderate amount of interest on Steam just because they are adjacent to that other Vampire Crawlers game. So, okay, you are like, hey, yeah, maybe I do think I'm a good enough developer still. What do you do then? I think this is something that I always say for our games, and that is that you need to have a good visual hook first, and gameplay and visual hook first before the rest of the game. You know, there's these different approaches to game development, game design, and all of that. Of like, on the one hand, it's like everything should be gray boxed, and if it's fun in a gray box, then it's fun in the real game. I'm more of the concept of it needs to look good and clear from the beginning of like, hey, this is something that people will be interested in. I think MO98, want to pat myself on the shoulder, it's a pretty good like recreation of the Windows 9 operating system, and it's just pure nostalgia bait. There's no better way to say it. It worked really well for us. Doesn't mean that I don't like the rest of the game, and the game itself is slop, but we started with that idea of Windows 98. What can we do with this? And then we ran down the like, we had like a few ideas for like game design based around that game idea basically. And then you also want to have, of course, your unique loop. And I think the unique loop here is especially where people kind of run into the wall with that node buster like of having just circle, hover over something, and that's it. It's not really a unique hook or like a unique loop anymore. So that one I would also reconsider exactly what you're going to do. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to be 100% original. I mean, we are not even that original. I'm going to be honest. I think we're going to make a video next week or something talking more about the development of MO98. It's an Execute ripoff. I don't know, like ripoff is the right way to say, but I saw Execute and I'm like, okay, I think I can make something else with this. There are a lot of parallels between those two games, especially when we first started development. We kind of managed to go our own separate way later on in development, but especially at the start, it kind of was based on another game. And probably Execute was also somewhat based on another game. There is the concept of like, there's no true original ideas, and I think that is fine. But I think what you can do is take an unoriginal idea and then give it an original twist almost of, hey, I saw this game that didn't explore a certain mechanic entirely, or the exploration of that mechanic went into a different direction than what I envisioned. I want to go and make that. And that is perfectly fine as well. And of course, one of the other like big advantages for making incremental games that I do want to talk about is like, it's good for small dev cycles, but I think that also doesn't mean that that's the only reason why you should make them. There are plenty of other genres that you can do as well if you want to go for these shorter scope dev cycles. It's something that we in our studio really like. There hasn't been a game we've spent more than 4 months in a row on, basically, in a long time. And I think that is kind of a superpower, to be able to develop games quickly. But that doesn't mean that you need to develop an incremental game just for the sake of developing something quickly. There are other genres. You can make friends love games, you can make horror games. There's so many other genres, honestly, like if you really wanted to, that you can do in less than 6 months, less than 9 months, less than 4 months, really. It doesn't have to be an incremental game. And I think that is like the one thing of like, it doesn't matter how hot the genre is right now, because you also need to keep in mind that the genre is kind of also miserable. If you start today, maybe you're going to still hit this June Next Fest, maybe not. You probably want to join a Steam Next Fest. Then you're looking at the October Next Fest, and then your timings are starting to become more of an issue, because then you're looking at a release end of 2026. Is that too late? Maybe. I don't know. But also, it doesn't matter how fast you can make the game if you just don't like making the game. I'm gonna be honest with that. MO98, it's a game that we started with the idea of, oh fuck, we need to make money for our studio, incremental games are running hot, we think we can make this. But don't confuse that desire of pursuing financial stability for the studio with a lack of actual passion for making the game. I think this is still a game we're very passionate about. It's on the Venn diagram. This is like the perfect overlap between the game you want to make and the game that's gonna make you money. And for us, that was good. But for you, that may not be the case. And I think that is perfectly fine as well. Don't feel like you need to make these games. I think another thing that I mentioned before is like, should you cancel your current game to make an incremental game? I think the answer is no. Should you cancel your current game is always a rough one, a rough question. Maybe it's going out of scope even for this video, but I think if you wanted to do the pure trend chasing, I think incremental games are too late. If you just want to do, like I said, like Vampire Survivors, but it has a crafting system or something like that. I think for that first wave, it's too late now. Maybe Vampire Crawlers is going to be your better bet. If you just want to make something small scoped and simple to try and catch another genre. This is not legal advice. Maybe you don't want to make Vampire Crawlers either because the game's gonna flop, who knows? Yeah, it's a small scope game, but I think it's also not something you should only just like drop and then quickly make something for making a few quick bucks. If you want to make the game, of course. I think it's also better to still see, can I wrap up my other games, my previous game that I'm working on right now, still release that and then move on. Because it's something I was thinking about recently of like, it doesn't matter. Like at some point, we canceled a lot of games. Canceling games doesn't really give you much. There's a very high amount of diminishing returns. Like the first few times you cancel a game, you can be like, yeah, but I learned a lot about the engine. I learned a lot about myself and like scope or whatever. But after you've canceled like 2 or 3 games, honestly, you're not really learning that much more, except you're kind of just building yourself up for failure because you are like, hey, I haven't been able to ship a game in in a year or whatever. And I really want to break that streak. I think it is still more beneficial in the long term for you to find a way to like, hey, how do I actually finish the game that I'm currently working on in like 2-3 months or whatever, versus, hey, I want to start a new game, I'm going to cancel my current game, or even not cancel, but you just lie to yourself and you're like, I'll revisit it later. You're never gonna revisit it later. Stop lying to yourself. And then trying to chase the incremental game trend when maybe you don't have the passion for the incremental game, or maybe it's just also, we made a lot of mistakes with making our incremental game as well, MO98. And now we are looking for the next game after MO98 will also be an incremental game. But that is coming in with already now 3 or 4 months of experience making an incremental game, having our underlying systems and game design nailed down. We made a lot of big mistakes as well during the development of MO98 that we now will not make again. If you start now, you're going to make those same mistakes that we probably ran into in like how you do your modifier system, how you track your variables or like your data and all of those things. Because there are some specific things for incremental games as well that you need to figure out now. So don't think that this is something that you can just pop out in 300 hours or whatever. I know that is like a cool concept, and I know some developers are capable of doing that, but I've been talking to you guys, my biters, for years at this point. I feel like I have a pretty decent grasp on you. And I'm gonna be honest, maybe you're not always as dedicated as strong as you think you are. Maybe that's mean to say. But I think just needlessly hopping trends when you do not feel like you actually have the experience for it, except just, oh, everyone else is making this, so maybe I should make one as well, is not the right way to go, I think. So I guess, long story short, should you make an incremental game? If you kind of wrapped up your current game's development, I would say, yeah, I think I would make an incremental game to try it out. But I would think very deeply for like a day. You honestly don't need like that much time either, but like think about a good game idea, a good hook, a good visual appeal, a good something, and not just something of like, oh, I have a black hole and I'm going to feed it and it's going to keep growing bigger, or like I'm gonna give it fish and it's gonna get bigger. I think that's please do better is I guess what it comes down to. So yeah, I think that's all I had to say. I wanted to give you my thoughts on it. We'll see how M1IDS launch is gonna go. It's gonna come out in a few days. So yeah, probably we'll talk some more in the coming weeks about how that release went. If you're new here, we've been running the studio for a few years at this point, and I make 2 videos every week talking about the process of running our own game studio and making games and the things that we learn along the way. So if that's something that you're interested in, then be sure to head down below and subscribe, because you'll be notified every time we upload a video. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!